Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Heart pounding, palms slick with sweat, he paused before the quaint storefront of Eliza's boutique. The window display showcased an array of colorful blouses and flowing skirts that made his breath catch. This was it, the moment of truth. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door, wincing at the cheerful jingle of bells that announced his arrival. The shop was mercifully empty, save for a middle-aged woman arranging a rack of dresses near the back. She glanced up, offering a warm smile. "Good morning. Let me know if you need any help." He managed a jerky nod, focusing on keeping his voice steady. "Thank you, I'm just browsing." Turning away quickly, he pretended to examine a nearby shelf of scarves while his heart raced. "You can do this," he told himself firmly. "Just act natural." Slowly, he made his way deeper into the shop, fingertips trailing over soft fabrics. A rack of blouses caught his eye. Delicate things in pastel hues with lace collars and pearl buttons. Before he could stop himself, he was reaching out to touch a pale lavender one. "That's a lovely choice," came a voice from behind him. He jumped, nearly knocking the hanger off the rack. The saleswoman stood there, head tilted inquisitively. "Are you looking for a gift?" "Yes," he stammered, face burning. "For my sister." Her eyebrows rose slightly, but her smile never wavered. "How thoughtful. What's the occasion?" "Her birthday," he blurted, inwardly cringing at the obvious lie. "Well, I'm sure she'll love it. That shade would look beautiful with her complexion." He blinked, confused. "Her complexion?" The woman's eyes twinkled. "Why, yes, she must have similar coloring to you. The lavender would really bring out those blue eyes of yours." Caught off guard, he found himself chuckling nervously. "Oh, right. Yes, we do look quite alike. Why don't you hold it up? Sometimes it helps to see how the color looks against your skin tone." Before he could protest, she had plucked the blouse from the rack and held it out expectantly. With trembling hands, he accepted it, marveling at the silky texture. "Go on, then," she encouraged gently. Taking a deep breath, he raised the hanger, holding the blouse in front of his chest. The soft fabric draped elegantly, the color lending a warm glow to his pale skin. "Oh, yes, that's perfect," the woman nodded approvingly. "Your sister is about your size as well." He swallowed hard. Yes, very similar build." "Wonderful. Then you know it will fit her beautifully. Would you like to try it on to be sure?" His eyes widened in panic. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly—" "Nonsense." She waved away his protests. "It's no trouble at all. The fitting rooms are right this way." Before he knew what was happening, she had ushered him towards a curtained alcove at the back of the shop, blouse in hand. "Take your time," she said kindly, "and let me know if you need anything else." With that, she drew the curtain closed, leaving him alone in the small space. He stared at his reflection in the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the flushed, wide-eyed man who stared back. "This is mad," he thought. "I should leave right now." But even as the thought formed, his hands were moving of their own accord, fingers working at the buttons of his jumper. He shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor. The blouse slipped over his head like a whisper, cool silk gliding across his skin. He smoothed it down with trembling hands, scarcely daring to look in the mirror. When he finally raised his eyes, his breath caught in his throat. The lavender hue was even lovelier against his bare skin, softening the angles of his face and lending a glow to his complexion. The lace collar framed his neck delicately, while the drape of the fabric hinted at curves he'd never known he possessed. For the first time in his life, he felt pretty. A gentle tap on the curtain made him jump. "How are we doing in there? Does it fit all right?" He cleared his throat, willing his voice not to shake. "Yes, it's perfect." "Wonderful! May I see?" Panic flared anew. "Oh, I don't think—" "Don't be shy, dear. I'm sure it looks lovely on you." Before he could protest further, the curtain twitched aside. He froze, arms wrapped protectively around his middle as the saleswoman's eyes widened. "Oh my," she breathed. "It's even more stunning than I imagined." He ducked his head, face burning. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "Nonsense!" She cut him off firmly. "You look absolutely beautiful." His head snapped up in shock, meeting her kind gaze. There was no judgment there, only warmth and understanding. "Really?" he whispered. She nodded emphatically. "Really? In fact," she tapped a finger against her chin thoughtfully, "I think I have just the thing to complete the look. Wait, right here?" She bustled off, leaving him blinking in confusion. A moment later, she returned, a flowing skirt draped over one arm. "This," she announced triumphantly, "will be perfect with that blouse. The cut will emphasize your waist beautifully." He gaped at her, unable to form words. She simply smiled, holding out the skirt expectantly. "Go on, then," she encouraged. "Try it on. I'll step out to give you some privacy." In a daze, he accepted the garment, fingertips caressing the soft fabric. The curtain swished closed once more, leaving him alone with his racing thoughts. "This is insane," a voice in his head insisted. "You can't possibly—" But even as doubt gnawed at him, his hands were already moving. He stepped out of his jeans, letting them puddle around his ankles. Taking a deep breath, he unzipped the skirt and stepped into it, pulling it up over his hips. The fabric settled around him like a caress, swishing gently as he moved. He smoothed it down with trembling hands, scarcely daring to look in the mirror. When he finally raised his eyes, his breath caught in his throat. The woman in the reflection was a stranger, and yet achingly familiar. The skirt's hem fluttered just below his knees, revealing a glimpse of shapely calves. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. A gentle tap on the curtain made him jump. "May I see?" He swallowed hard, heart racing. This was it, the moment of truth. Taking a deep breath, he reached out and pulled the curtain aside. The saleswoman's face lit up with delight. "Oh, my dear, you look absolutely radiant." He ducked his head, face burning even as a smile tugged at his lips. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," she said firmly. "Here, come take a look." She led him to a 3-paneled mirror near the dressing rooms. He gasped softly as he took in his reflection from all angles. The blouse and skirt worked in perfect harmony, creating an elegant silhouette he'd only ever dreamed of. It's perfect," he whispered. The woman nodded, beaming. "I quite agree. Now, shall we accessorize?" Before he could protest, she was draping a delicate scarf around his neck and fastening a slim belt at his waist. Each addition seemed to transform him further until the person in the mirror was barely recognizable as the nervous young man who'd entered the shop. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Absolutely stunning." He turned to her, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you." She patted his arm gently. "No need for thanks, dear. This is what I do. Help people find the outfits that make them feel like their truest selves." He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Now then," she continued briskly, "shall I wrap these up for you?" Reality came crashing back. He glanced at the price tags, wincing inwardly. "Oh, I don't know if I can afford—" "Nonsense!" She waved away his concerns. "It's all on sale today, and I insist on throwing in the scarf as a gift." Before he could protest further, she was ushering him back to the dressing room. "You get changed, and I'll have everything rung up and ready to go." In a daze, he changed back into his own clothes. Each item he removed felt like shedding a piece of himself. But the memory of how he'd looked, how he'd felt in that outfit buoyed his spirits. When he emerged, the saleswoman was waiting with a discreet bag. He pulled out his wallet with trembling hands, half expecting to wake from this surreal dream at any moment. As she handed him his receipt, she leaned in conspiratorially. "You know, we're having a special event next weekend, a private shopping night for our more discerning clientele. Perhaps you'd like to attend?" He blinked in surprise. Yes, I'd like that very much. She beamed, scribbling something on a card. Wonderful. Here are the details. I do hope we'll see you there. As he stepped out onto the bustling street, the weight of the bag in his hand felt like a promise. For the first time in his life, he walked with his head held high, a secret smile playing at his lips. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. And it all began with a single step into a small shop on an ordinary autumn day. As he made his way back to the train station, his mind whirled with excitement and anticipation. The events of the morning felt almost dreamlike, yet the solid weight of the shopping bag in his hand was a tangible reminder of his transformation. He found a quiet corner on the platform and pulled out his phone, fingers trembling slightly as he entered the details from the card into his calendar. A private shopping night. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. But after today's experience, he felt a newfound courage blossoming within him. The train ride home passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to tear open the bag right there and caress the silky fabrics once more. Another part feared that someone might notice, might somehow guess his secret. He settled for clutching the bag close, a small smile playing at his lips every time he remembered how he'd looked in the mirror. As the familiar scenery of his small town came into view, a pang of anxiety twisted in his gut. How would he explain his purchase if his flatmate was home? What if someone had seen him enter the shop? He shook his head, banishing the negative thoughts. Today was a day for celebration, not fear. He'd taken a monumental step towards embracing his true self, and nothing could diminish that accomplishment. Stepping off the train, he took a deep breath of the air. The late afternoon sun bathed the quiet streets in a warm glow, as if nature itself was celebrating his newfound freedom. He walked with a lightness in his step that he'd never experienced before, head held high despite the occasional curious glance from passers-by. Approaching his flat, he fished out his keys, ears straining for any sound of movement inside. Silence greeted him as he pushed open the door. His flatmate must be out. A wave of relief washed over him, followed quickly by excitement. He'd have the place to himself for a while. Hurrying to his room, he closed and locked the door behind him. With trembling hands, he carefully removed each item from the bag, laying them out reverently on his bed. The lavender blouse seemed to shimmer in the fading sunlight streaming through his window. The skirt's soft folds invited his touch. Even the delicate scarf, a gift from the kind saleswoman, held a world of possibility. Unable to resist any longer, he stripped off his everyday clothes and slipped into his new outfit. The fabric caressed his skin like a lover's touch, instantly transporting him back to that magical moment in the shop's dressing room. He turned to face his full-length mirror, breath catching in his throat. The person staring back at him was both familiar and utterly new, a perfect synthesis of who he had always been and who he was finally allowing himself to become. Twirling experimentally, he watched in delight as the skirt flared out around him. A laugh bubbled up from deep within, surprised and joyous. For the first time in his life, he felt truly, completely himself. The sound of a key in the lock startled him from his reverie. His flatmate's voice called out a greeting, footsteps approaching his door. Panic flared for a moment before being replaced by a steely resolve. This was who he was, who he had always been, beneath the facade he'd maintained for so long. Taking a deep breath, he smoothed down his skirt and reached for the doorknob. It was time to step into the light and show the world his true self.
"Hey, mate, you won't believe what happened at work today."
His flatmate's voice trailed off as he took in the sight before him. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, to his immense surprise and relief, a slow smile spread across his friend's face.
"Well,"
his flatmate said warmly,
"it's about time. That color looks great on you, by the way."
Tears of joy and relief sprang to his eyes as he was enveloped in a fierce hug. In that moment, he knew that everything was going to be all right. The journey ahead might be challenging, but he would face it as his authentic self, surrounded by love and acceptance. As the evening wore on, they talked for hours about his experiences that day, about the fears and doubts he'd carried for so long, about his hopes for the future. His flatmate listened with genuine interest and support, asking thoughtful questions and offering words of encouragement. Later, as he lay in bed, still wrapped in the silky embrace of his new clothes, he felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, and undoubtedly some difficult conversations. But for now, he reveled in the simple joy of being truly, completely himself. He drifted off to sleep with a smile on his lips, dreaming of the private shopping night to come and all the possibilities that lay ahead. In his dreams, he walked tall and proud, no longer hiding in the shadows, but stepping boldly into the light of his new life. The week leading up to the private shopping event passed in a blur of anticipation and nervous excitement. Each day he found himself counting down the hours, both thrilled and terrified by the prospect of what lay ahead. At work, he went about his usual routine, but there was a new lightness to his step, a quiet confidence that didn't go unnoticed by his colleagues. More than once, he caught someone looking at him curiously, as if trying to put their finger on what had changed. In the evenings, he would retreat to his room and lose himself in the joy of trying on his new outfit. He experimented with different ways of styling the blouse and skirt, adding accessories from his meager collection and practicing his walk in the full-length mirror. His flatmate, true to his word, was nothing but supportive, even offering to help him shop for shoes that would complete the look. As the day of the event drew near, he found himself facing a new dilemma: what to wear to the shop. After much deliberation, he decided on a compromise, his usual jeans and jumper, but with the blouse layered underneath. It was a small step, but it felt significant, a bridge between his old life and the new one he was stepping into. The morning of the event dawned bright and clear. He awoke early, too excited to sleep, and spent extra time on his grooming routine. As he buttoned up the blouse beneath his jumper, he caught sight of himself in the mirror and couldn't help but smile. Even this small touch of femininity made him feel more like himself than he ever had before. His flatmate gave him an encouraging thumbs up as he headed out the door.
"You've got this, mate. Go show 'em who you really are."
The train ride to Barnsley seemed to take an eternity. He found himself constantly checking his watch, willing the minutes to pass faster. When the familiar streets finally came into view, his heart began to race with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. As he approached Eliza's boutique, he saw that the windows had been discreetly covered. A small sign on the door read, "Private event, by invitation only." Taking a deep breath, he raised his hand and knocked. The door opened, revealing the smiling face of the saleswoman who had been so kind to him on his first visit.
"Welcome back, dear. We're so glad you could make it. Come in, come in."
Stepping inside, he was greeted by the soft murmur of conversation and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. The shop had been transformed, with racks of clothing arranged to create intimate browsing areas and a small refreshment table set up near the back. What struck him most, however, were the other customers. Men and women of all ages browsed the racks, some dressed in typical everyday wear, while others had fully embraced their feminine side. The atmosphere was one of acceptance and camaraderie, with people chatting and laughing as they tried on different outfits. "Now then," the saleswoman said, drawing his attention back to her.
"What shall we start with today? Perhaps something a bit bolder than last time."
He nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face.
"Yes, I think I'm ready for that."
Over the next few hours, he lost himself in a whirlwind of silk and lace, trying on outfits he'd only ever dreamed of wearing. The other customers and staff were unfailingly kind, offering compliments and suggestions with genuine warmth. As the evening wore on, he found himself chatting with a group of regulars, sharing stories and advice. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen and accepted for who he was. When it came time to leave, his arms were laden with bags containing his carefully chosen new wardrobe. But more precious than any material purchase was the sense of belonging he'd found, the knowledge that he wasn't alone in his journey. Stepping out into the cool night air, he took a deep breath, savoring the moment. The path ahead might not always be easy, but he knew now that he had the strength to walk it, and a community to support him along the way. As he made his way back to the train station, he felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The future stretched out before him, full of possibility and promise. And for the first time in his life, he was ready to embrace it fully, without fear or hesitation. The train ride home was a stark contrast to his journey earlier that day. Where before he had been a bundle of nerves and anticipation, now he felt a deep sense of calm and contentment. The gentle rocking of the carriage and the soft murmur of fellow passengers created a cocoon of tranquility, allowing him to reflect on the transformative experience he'd just had. His mind wandered back to the faces he'd seen at the event. Men and women of all ages, sizes, and backgrounds, united by their shared journey of self-discovery. He remembered the warmth in their eyes as they shared stories, the genuine compliments exchanged as they helped each other select outfits. For the first time in his life, he felt part of something larger than himself, a community where he could truly belong. As the familiar landscape of his town came into view, he felt a momentary pang of anxiety. How would he integrate this new part of himself into his everyday life? The bubble of acceptance he'd experienced at the shop seemed far removed from the realities of his small-town existence. But then he remembered the unwavering support of his flatmate, the quiet strength he'd found within himself over the past week. He thought of the business card tucked safely in his wallet, a lifeline to this new world he'd discovered. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he had the resources and the resilience to face them. Stepping off the train, he took a deep breath of the cool night air. The streets were quiet at this late hour, but instead of making him feel exposed, the solitude felt empowering. He walked with his head held high, the rustle of shopping bags a reminder of the treasures he carried. Not just the clothes, but the newfound confidence and self-acceptance. As he approached his flat, he saw a light on in the window. His flatmate was still up, probably waiting to hear about his evening. The thought brought a warm smile to his face. He had so much to share, so many experiences to recount. Unlocking the door, he was greeted by the smell of freshly brewed tea and the sound of his flatmate's favorite music playing softly in the background.
"Welcome back,"
his friend called from the kitchen. "How was it? Did you have a good time?" He paused in the doorway, taking in the familiar comfort of home with new eyes. "It was incredible," he said softly. "I've never felt anything like it." His flatmate appeared in the hallway, a mug of tea in each hand and a warm smile on his face.
"Well then, sounds like we've got some celebrating to do. Why don't you go get changed into something fabulous and I'll grab the biscuits, then you can tell me all about it."
Grateful tears pricked at his eyes as he nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. He retreated to his room, carefully unpacking his new clothes and selecting an outfit. As he slipped into a flowing dress that made him feel both elegant and powerful, he caught sight of himself in the mirror. The person staring back at him was radiant with joy, eyes shining with a newfound confidence.
This was who he had always been meant to be, he realized.
And now, finally, he had the courage to show that person to the world. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.